Welcome to Hagerty's Buyer's Guides for this, the Alfa Romeo Spider. So the first thing you want to do if you're looking at one of these to buy it is to find out exactly what you have got on your hands. There's a number of ways you can do this. Firstly, you've got the chassis number, which is stamped into the front bulkhead right here. On pretty much all the Spiders, it is right here. On the right hand side of the bulkhead, you've also got a type plate. Now this one is a South African spec Spider, so it's slightly different, but they'll start with 105 or 115, and that will tell you exactly what designation it is. Then you've got the engine. Alfa Romeo twin cam, all aluminium engine, wet liner. They're fantastic little Revy engines, and they're superb. They're also completely interchangeable, all the way from the smaller 1300s up to this, which is the 2 litre. So over the years, lots of these things have had engine swaps. What you want to do, if you're looking at a car, is to make sure that it actually has got the engine that you want in it. The way to do this is you look at the front of the block down here, and there's a stamping. If you've got a circle with a line going vertically through it, it's a 1300. If it's a circle with a square inside, it's a 1600. If it's a circle with a triangle inside, it's a 1750. And if that triangle has a dot in the middle of it, it's a later model 1750. And then finally, if there's a circle and then a square inside the circle with a diagonal across that, that's a 2 litre. Some of the 2 litres also had 2.0 stamped on them, but they were generally from the much later cars. This is a 2 litre Camtail Spider. It's a Series 2 1976 car, and this does have the right 2 litre engine in it. It's got twin Solex carburetors. They were fitted with Duettos and Webers. Later cars are also fitted with either a mechanical fuel injection or into the 80s and 90s with electronic Bosch fuel injection. This is the original air filter, although quite a lot of them have been converted now to sort of ram pipes, which was a GTA modification. The great thing about these cars, and pretty much goes for the whole thing, is that you can modify pretty much everything, and you can get pretty much everything from a number of suppliers in the UK, which is really, really good because you can upgrade them quite easily. Also, as you can see, you can get to pretty much everything in the engine, and you can deal with it yourself. So, as somebody who wants to engineer their own cars and to be the mechanic, you can do that. I've even lifted a head off of these things myself one-handed, although it's probably not great for your back. Things to look out for under the bonnet. When the engine is running, it shouldn't be too tappety. You do sometimes get a bit of a chain slap at the front of the cam cover, and that can be adjusted quite easily. But anything with the tappets or with the top of the cams, you really should get checked out. The other thing is the carb mounts. Quite often, if it's running and you tilt the carbs forward like so, if you get an increase in the engine revs, that means that you've got cracks in those. These have been replaced with aluminium ones, so there's no movement in there. The other thing is make sure that the head isn't leaking, either oil out or water in. Obviously, water in, check any condensation or any emulsification under the oil filler cap, and then also check for oil leaks underneath the head, especially underneath the carburetors. They're not a major issue, but the heads do warp on these if they get too hot. There's a few other things to check whilst you're under the bonnet. Firstly, you've got the engine mounts. They should not really be sagging, and there should be a good gap between the engine and the cross member. 2 servos, sometimes they came with 1 servo. Make sure there's no brake fluid leaks. Sometimes the big diaphragm in these gives way and they fill up with brake fluid, which is not great for your braking system. All the hoses, check those for leakage, and then just have a really good look around the engine as you would for any other car, just to see what the state is and see how well it's been maintained. Next, you want to have a look at the bodywork. Bodywork was never a strength with Alfa Romeos of this era, and you've got to look under the wheel arches, under the front and rear valances, and especially the sills. If they've been repaired, check that they've been repaired properly. There's a water drain that goes downhill here and it goes through the sills. If that blocks, then you've got a real problem and they rot from the inside out. If they've been fixed, make sure that the doors have been fitted back properly and you've got proper panel gaps, and there should also be a seam which runs down here between the bottom of the door and the bottom of the sill. Okay, that's a good sign that it has been done and they've been done properly if that seam isn't there. The other thing in terms of the bodywork, you've got to look at other footwells, front two especially. The reason they go, people think it's because the hood leaks, which generally it doesn't. The reason they go is there's two scuttle drains going underneath here, which are corrugated plastic in a car of this area. They tend to crack, and so when water accumulates in the scuttle, it will then drain into the footwells, and these will rot out. Always lift the carpets, or if they're original like these, rubber mats, and have a look underneath. Best thing you can do is you replace them with Series 4 scuttle drains, which are rubber tubes and a lot more durable. While we're in here, have a look at the inside of the car. This is a South African spec Spider, so it's got a leather covered steering wheel, but most European and UK spec cars have got a wood rim. It's beautiful, but they crack, especially in the sun. Have a look at that. They can be replaced, they can be repaired, but it's going to cost you quite a lot of money. The other weakness of Alfas over the years is the interior trim quality, and this car was no exception to that. It's actually quite vulnerable to being knocked and broken, and just check, because that is probably the one thing which you will find hard to replace if things are broken. The last thing you want to look for is the hood. Okay, you can replace these hoods yourselves. I did this one, but it's not that easy, and it can cost you probably about £500 to get them replaced. They should fit tightly, they should fit all the way around here. This little clip needs to be here to make sure it doesn't leak, and when you shut the door, that should fit in and seal nicely. If it does, then you've got no problem. They're actually great hoods. You've got two hooks, one either side. They unclip, it peels back. You can actually do it one-handed while you're driving. It's very easy to put back up again. There is a rubber seal in the front that should be there, and that will keep you nice and weatherproof. Hood's probably one of the best strengths of an Alfa Spider in terms of a roadster. Okay, the driving position takes a little bit of getting used to. Short arms, long legs, and I'm used to it, so I don't have a problem with it, but a lot of people do. You end up having one of your legs kind of branched out either side of the steering wheel. The gearbox is very long throw, and it should go in nicely and easily. When you're driving, the synchros tend to go on these first before anything else. Second gear and reverse tend to get bad. If it pops out of either of those, the first thing you want to do is just check this boot. There's a rubber boot inside there, and sometimes it can get bunched up, especially in reverse. When you're back down here, it'll just knock you out of gear. So before you do a big gearbox rebuild, that's what you should check. When you start the Spider, it should start relatively easily. Choke down here, and it should tick over 800 to 1000 RPM. You've got three temperature gauges, or three gauges in front of you. You've got temperature, pressure, and a fuel gauge. The sort of rule of thumb with the two left-hand gauges is water temperature shouldn't really go above halfway, which is 180 degrees Fahrenheit, and the oil pressure really shouldn't go under halfway, which is, it's marked up at 57, and it should be, when you're running, between there or the right hand side of the gauge. They're quite normal for these engines to, as you rev the engine, that oil pressure does fluctuate and the gauge does move. That's quite normal, but really when it is ticking over, it should be over halfway. So when you drive them, Alfa Spiders should be balanced and nimble, okay? If they wallow at all, if they wobble around the road, you've got something wrong, and it's generally the suspension. Suspension is, again, relatively easy to both do yourself and also to upgrade. There's loads of packs on the market. There's loads of various different bushes and different things you can get from the suppliers. So it's not a difficult job per se, but get it set up properly as a professional. As I said, from the engine should rev freely. There shouldn't be any knocking. And the other thing to look out for on these is a thumping from underneath here, underneath the central console. And what that is probably the drive shaft. Now that could be the drive shaft mounting. There's a rubber donut on there. If that fails, you've got a big problem on your hands. So get that checked out, or have a look underneath to make sure it's all in one bit. Also, the bushes on there can go wrong and can weaken. Well worth getting checked out. Steering should be good and light. Shouldn't be heavy. The steering boxes on these, especially the earlier cars, tended to leak. And so do have a look. There's a little inspection cover there. Have a look on underneath, take it off and see what you can do and see if there's any lubricant left in it. If there isn't, you can fill those as a temporary measure with a thicker lubricant like a grease, but just make sure that there's something in there. In terms of acceleration, the car should accelerate really quite freely. They rev all the way up. This one redlines at 6,500 RPM. And Alfa engines like to be revved. In terms of stopping, they should also be very good. This was a massively advanced car for its age. It has disc brakes all around. This one's got twin servos on them, and it really should stop very, very well. If it doesn't, again, get it checked out. So there you have it, the Hagerty buyer's guide for the Alfa Romeo Julius Spider. We hope you've enjoyed watching, and please tell us in the comments below which other cars you'd like us to review. Thanks for watching.